Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast. We just finished up talking about the quarterback moves in the NFL from the first 24 hours of free agency. We highlighted the 9 moves that had taken place, just checked, and during the end of that segment, we actually had one other move, some breaking news that Drew Lock will be headed to the Giants, ultimately in a backup role, but there's a couple things that stand out to me briefly about this, and that is, that the Giants have been sort of in the rumor mill of potentially looking to trade up for a quarterback in the upcoming draft. That seems a lot less likely now at this moment. Either that, or they are going to eat the dead money or try and trade off Daniel Jones. I don't know if that's quite as likely, but is an interesting little development there. Also interesting because the Seahawks had talked about the fact that they were intrigued in Drew Lock in the long term. He had a chance to potentially take over the starting role this past year. They brought back Geno Smith, but their GM, who I'm blanking on his name at the moment, he said that he was a believer in Drew Lock, and now he is out of the building. Does this mean that the Seahawks, I had been thinking about the idea that they could be a dark horse for a Justin Fields. Maybe this clears the way a little bit more. Maybe it means that they are going to draft a quarterback themselves. Time will tell, but a little bit of an interesting development there. But we will be now getting into my list of winners and losers from the first day of free agency. Let me know what you guys think in the comments in terms of who won or lost, but we are going to start with the first winner, which is Kirk Cousins. This is a little bit of an obvious one, but heading into his age 36 season, coming off a torn Achilles and making $45 million annually, that is a big-time win. He gets to go to an Atlanta offense that I thought was the most appealing destination for any quarterbacks on the move coming into this offseason, where you have pass catchers in Drake London and Kyle Pitts. You have a backfield behind you of Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, a young, solid offensive line as well. They also just went out and signed Darnell Mooney today, former Bears wide receiver. So plenty of options there. I think that Kirk Cousins should do very well. He is doing very well for himself in terms of financially. One of the best of his generation in terms of getting his contracts, but also going to be in a very solid position come the actual NFL season. My second winner I have is the running back market. I think that this has been a big conversation over the past couple off-season in terms of how much can you actually pay running backs. Is it worth giving them a second contract? And they go out and a bunch of them end up getting multi-year deals. Saquon and Josh Jacobs both get deals that include over $12 million annually. So I think that this was a nice development for the running back market in terms of those guys getting paid. Clearly, as you saw from some of these moves, the future of the position likely is somewhat tied to being able to catch the ball out of the backfield. I know that Eckler didn't quite get the same dollar value, but I also think that his best years are just behind him. We saw real regression last year, but overall, I think he still gets a contract. A bunch of these running backs switched up positions, played musical chairs, and ended up being eventful for the running backs. Next winner I have is Bryce Young. The Panthers attempted to upgrade their offensive line. They signed a couple new starting guards that should be upgrades for them for this upcoming season. Bryce Young, obviously a very small stature and somebody that the weapons still aren't great, but at least they are starting to try and help things get easier for him as he heads into his sophomore season. The Panthers signed Robert Hunt from the Miami Dolphins, 5-year deal, $100 million, and they also signed Damian Lewis from the Seahawks to a 4-year, $53 million contract as well. They are hoping that their first-round pick from 2022, Ikem Ekwonu, who they took 6th overall, can take a step forwards as well. He is a tackle. He's been fine for them, but definitely not quite the level of success they were hoping to see from him yet. So they still definitely have a ways to go when it comes to some of the playmaking weapons as well. But I do think that this is a nice development for the future of Bryce Young. Next winner I have is the Vikings defense. Headed into last season, Minnesota was definitely lacking some playmakers on the defensive side of the ball. I thought that Brian Flores did a good job scheming them into some pretty solid defensive numbers as a unit as a whole, but it was very clear with them. They were very heavily reliant on blitzing. They did so more than any other team in the league last season, blitzed on 51.5% of opposing teams' dropbacks, which was significantly the most. And they ended up being middle of the pack in a lot of these statistics. I know that middle of the pack isn't great, but I also thought that they had a lot of holes going into the season. But where they struggled the most was pass defense and third down defense. They do still have some holes in the secondary, but I really did like the additions that they made to get a more effective pass rush. They bring in Jonathan Grenard of the Houston Texans from last year. He had 12.5 sacks last season, was top 20 in the league in pressures with 32. He's a very promising young player. They add Andrew Van Ginkel as well, who turned in a nice season. He reunites with Brian Flores when the two of them were in Miami together. He had a couple of his best seasons early in his career when Flores was involved in the defense there. Van Ginkel, I think, was a nice addition as well. And they also brought in Blake Cashman, a very underrated, in my eyes, young linebacker. Had a career season last year. So they add a couple Texans. They add one of Flores' former guys. And I think it should help to at least solidify their front seven a little bit more. Again, they are still weak in the secondary, but ideally now, with guys like Grenard and Van Ginkel, they can generate more pressure from their front four as opposed to relying on a lot of blitz-heavy calls, and I think that that is a step in the right direction for them. They don't end up getting Kirk Cousins, the Vikings as a whole, but they put that money to pretty good use, in my opinion. They are going to lose Danielle Hunter, who just had 16.5 sacks for them, so that does hurt, but they are getting younger. They're getting more well-rounded. Do still need to add in the secondary, though. I have a few light winners here. I do think that the Patriots won a little bit from the first 24 hours. They retained the key free agents that were hitting the open market, Michael Onwenu, Hunter Henry, and the deal hasn't been finalized yet, but Kyle Duggar, they placed the transition tag on, so should be able to bring back all of those guys. They signed Jacoby Brissett to a deal. Could be a very nice bridge option for the offense that has a lot of holes. So even if they go in and bring in a new quarterback in the draft, that is, they still have a little bit of a ways to go. The deal for Brissett was just 1 year, $8 million. I thought the fact that they were able to get him cheaper for what the Vikings signed Sam Darnold for was pretty solid for them. I would rather have Brissett than Darnold. I understand maybe the ceiling with Darnold is a little bit higher, but I just trust Brissett. I think he is a real professional. He doesn't lose you games, and ultimately the Patriots can take a step forward. It's pretty hard for them to take a step back after the disaster that last season was, but bringing in Brissett does potentially give them some more upside and gives them a little bit of flexibility in terms of what they would want to do with a rookie quarterback should they decide to draft one. They added Antonio Gibson as a third down running back as well. to back up Ramondre Stevenson, who spent a lot of time last year ineffective and also injured down the stretch of the year. They did have to bite the bullet on Devontae Parker, who they released. They're going to have to take on $6.3 million in dead money, but it opens up a spot in the receiver room after a few dreadful seasons for Parker. Warren Sharp on Twitter tweeted out that Devontae Parker was dead last in creating separation the past 4 seasons according to NFL Next Gen Stats, and that checks out from the eye test as well. Pats still have a long way to go, but I think they did what they needed to yesterday. Another slight winner I have here is Will Levis. I just liked a couple of the pieces that they added that should make the quarterback job easier for whoever is in for the Titans next year, assuming it's going to be Levis. They add Lloyd Cushenberry, the center for the Broncos. He's definitely an upgrade from what they had last year, and he's a very solid pass blocker. They make him the 3rd highest paid center in the league. They also bring in Tony Pollard. Pollard is not an upgrade over Derrick Henry. It is a step back, but I do think that he can also work in this position for them. He's definitely more of a receiving threat than Henry ever was, which could help Levis as well. Now, Pollard was not very efficient last year in the run game or receiving game, but perhaps him and Tyjae Spears can make a nice little duo there. They also added a little bit of help in the secondary, the Titans did. Not that affects Levis, but they bring in Chidobe Awuzie, who has been recovering from an ACL injury, showed some promise again last year. My final winner here is the Commanders. Under new head coach Dan Quinn, they bring in a couple of his former Cowboys, Tyler Biadasz and Dorrance Armstrong, 2 very solid players. I think that Armstrong is more of a rotational piece, but I do think he went pretty underrated on that Dallas defense. Biadasz is a really nice centerpiece for them on the offensive line. They also get Austin Eckler at a very cheap price, just 2 years, $11.43 million. His best years are absolutely behind him, but could be a nice piece to put alongside the young and promising Brian Robinson Jr. 2 running backs that can catch passes, should be able to help out whoever their next starting quarterback is. And ultimately, I thought that the moves, again, not super drastic, but steps in the right direction for them. Now on to the losers. I have the Dallas Cowboys, the only team that did not make a move yesterday. They lose Pollard, Dorrance Armstrong, and Tyler Biadasz. It was rumored that they were interested in Zach Moss, but the price was too high. Moss ends up going to Cincinnati, and this is coming into an offseason where Jerry Jones said they were going to be all in, which obviously gets aggregated a little bit extra because it's Jerry Jones, because it's the Cowboys. But we are going to have to see what this all-in really does pan out to be. But Jerry Jones's comments aside, I feel like their priority will likely be trying to get Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Micah Parsons all on extensions. So this offseason isn't necessarily a loss for them, but it is off to a really slow start. And to not do anything in the first 24 hours does make them a loser in my eyes. Justin Jefferson is another loser coming out of yesterday. Vikings losing Kirk Cousins, signing Sam Darnold to replace him. And there is still a strong chance that it could end up being somebody else, whether that's in the draft. I don't think that Justin Fields is in play for them, but maybe they try and make something work there. As of now, though, Darnold does project to be the week 1 starter. You can argue that Jefferson might end up being a winner for the sole fact that the Vikings might have to pay him some record-setting money to get him to stay with the team, but I don't think that Justin Jefferson, should he be in a Vikings jersey next year, is going to feel like too much of a winner during the year with whatever quarterback he's playing with. Who knows? Maybe something pans out there. Maybe it's Darnold. Maybe it's a rookie. But to me, I think it feels like Justin Jefferson lost. The next loser here, going to try and speed it up down the stretch a little bit here, but I do think that the Bears and Justin Fields are a loser. The quarterback cycle has come around a lot, and Fields is still on the Bears with a very limited market. Now, I would imagine he's still going to be traded. I think that he could still get an opportunity. But for the Bears here to have not gotten anything of value for him, and his value is only going to continue to drop, I think, as we get closer to the draft, it is a little bit damning for them. Now, interestingly, the Mac Jones was traded on Sunday for just a 6th round pick. He, of course, if you go back to the 2021 NFL draft, he went just 4 picks after Justin Fields did. The trajectory of their careers are headed in opposite directions, which is why the public perception of Fields is so much higher than Mac Jones. But I'm curious what that looks like within NFL front offices, because I think I would argue that Mac Jones had a better rookie season than any season that Justin Fields has put together. Now, Fields actually somehow received an MVP vote for last season. Now, he was incredible on the ground. I do think that his floor is higher because of his athletic ability, but the point being, the Bears were hoping for a day 2 draft pick or along those lines for Justin Fields, and now a comparable quarterback has just gone for only a 6th round draft pick. Does not bode well for the Bears or for Fields, really, who's hoping to be a starter this upcoming season. I think that the Panthers owner, David Tepper, is a loser because of the Brian Burns situation. It just really blew up in his face. They turned down the offer of 2 first-round picks and a second-rounder a couple seasons ago. You've likely heard the story already, but they stuck it out with Burns for the next year and a half to accomplish very little. They were unwilling to negotiate a contract with him, and they sold low for just a 2nd and a 5th-round pick. Unless you think that Brian Burns is going to fall off of a cliff, why would you trade him now at this point and sell so low? Why not pay him and move on from him at a later date during the season or maybe next off season? The Panthers are a bad team right now. They don't have very many great players on their roster or anybody they're going to have to pay drastic money to in the near future. I feel like they could have slow played this more if they were willing to play ball with him. They don't. And I do know that they had a change in GM, but David Tepper has been known to be a hands-on owner over his tenure, and I think that he becomes a loser the way that this all played out. Last couple losers here. Any defensive front in the AFC, the Ravens just signed Derrick Henry. That is a very terrifying thought for anybody playing the Ravens with Lamar Jackson's ability to run and with Derrick Henry being the power back that he is. They should be getting Keaton Mitchell back from injury this season. I think the Ravens' run game, which was the best in the league last year, is actually going to get better. Gus Edwards did head out the door to the Chargers, but still, I think Henry is an upgrade, and that makes for a very scary sight. My final loser here is Patrick Mahomes and any other AFC West quarterbacks. The fact that Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins are going to be on the same defensive line is going to be terrifying for any quarterback lining up across from them. AFC West, of course, plays the Raiders twice a year, but that is, again, I can't overstate how excited I am to watch that specific pairing. I think that the two of them are some of the best at their positions, and I think that it's just going to be a lot of fun to see play out. So we are going to take our next break here. I do have a couple other, not winners or losers, but people that fell right outside of the margin, but we don't have time to get into it right now. So we are going to be taking our second break. When we come back on the other side, I will be giving my gray area teams in terms of winners and losers, and I will be recapping some of the drama that has taken place in the NFC East. So stick with us, and we will be right back.